Hello?
Okay, start over. Sorry.
Right now?
Mm-hmm.
We're recording? Hello, and welcome to another edition of Zav and Gabe's film review show, aptly titled My Dinner with Gabe. How you doing? I'm Gabe Van Handel, and that's Zav LaPlay, and this is our show, My Dinner with Gabe. It's another episode, June 29th. Here was your box office, June 22nd through the 24th. Ha! Unremarkable weekend at the movies, but yet it happened. Brave, the new Pixar film, opened up first with $66 million with a strong per theater average. That means how much money each individual theater made individually was about 15,000. It was pretty high. The highest per theater average, besides Moonrise Kingdom, which had a strong per theater average of 8,000 as well. Pretty good for the small sleeper indie hit that it is. Studio indie, I should say. Second place was Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted, with a strong third weekend with 19 million, only dropping 42% in its third week. Big business for a animated film, especially a DreamWorks animated film, which has been rising up and strongly starting to compete with Disney and Pixar Fair. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter opened third with a somewhat disappointing 16 million. Not great numbers for the 70 million budgeted film, which did not know what attitude to play. It should have gone for silly. It went for serious. Stupid. Fourth was Prometheus with 9.9 million in its third week, raking in some cash still, not dropping as fast as some people predicted. Snow White and the Huntsman was fifth. Oh my goodness, with $8 million. Still raking in cash. Rock of Ages was sixth, dropping down in the box office with $7 million. That's My Boy was seventh. Ha ha! Second week out, it is a huge disappointment, as is Rock of Ages. Films that were really dismal premieres last week, and even worse second weeks this week. I don't mind that either of these films are disappearing. They deserve it. Marvel's The Avengers was eighth with 7.1 million. Still going strong. Just passing the $600 million mark the other day. Strong stuff. Not that I care about the movie that much, but big numbers, big news. Men in Black 3, $5.7 million. Woo! Number 9. Seeking a Friend for the End of the World, the quirky Steve Carell and Keira Knightley comedy, opened 10th. Not disappointing, not great for the Focus Features comedy. $3.8 million. Not a great per theater average, as much as these films which had disappointing second week averages. Not great for a film relying on strong per theater averages, especially considering it's in a smaller amount of cinemas. Oh well, it's a smaller budgeted film and is likely to rake in its money domestically as well as worldwide. And if it finds a cult audience on DVD, it will have a lasting tribute and lasting dollar signs in its pocket. But money doesn't matter. Where's the movie show? Who cares? That's it for your box office. Who cares? Anyway, movies coming out this week, June 29th. It's Friday. This is your movie info here from Gabe. People like us. Solid acting. Good adult screenplay, but calculated and too plotted and melodramatic for its own good. Here's the story, guys. Chris Pine's a guy who finds out that that his dad had another family with other people, and he looks them up and becomes friends with Elizabeth Banks and her kid, and a bunch of life lessons ensue, yada, yada, yada. Not the worst thing to happen, not the best thing to happen. So, let's all get over it. Let's go see this movie, and then let's forget about it. So maybe in 10 years, someone will bring it up over coffee and like, well, I really like that other Elizabeth Banks movie, but that's about it. See it if you want to. Don't if you don't want to. It's not really going to make that much of a difference. And moving on. Magic Mike. Woo! This is a movie that some people might not be excited for, but they should be. Soderbergh is back, baby. He was back last year with 2 movies, with Contagion and Haywire, and he's back again. He's on fire. Magic Mike is a film about a stripper, and it's a semi-autobiographical story, obviously without the loopholes and without the storytelling magic that Warner Brothers can bring you of Channing Tatum's real-life transition from stripper to actor, as directed by Steven Soderbergh. In the film, Mike takes on a young dancer named The Kid, who is played by Alex Pettyfer, takes him under his wing and schools him in the fine art of partying, picking up women, and making easy money. That's the official description from Warner Brothers. The film, however, what they're saying about the film, Reed Carolyn's script is supposed to be witty, wry, direct, fun, and great. Steven Soderbergh's direction is tender, touching, inobtrusive, and just solid. Soderbergh is, even when he makes bad films, he is just solid.
What's he known for?
Traffic, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which both of us are
The Girlfriend Experience.
Are not a big fan of. The Girlfriend Experience, which I love, and I know you didn't really care for. I've heard a lot that, I mean, all across the board, people that love underground cinema, people that love mainstream cinema, pretty much that movie is disliked across the board. Critically, it was one of the most acclaimed films of the year it came out, but in terms of personal reactions, I've seen nothing but disdain for it.
Which one?
The Girlfriend Experience.
I didn't think it was terrible. I just thought it wasn't that
Amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't that amazing. But
I can understand that.
That's true with most movies.
That's really true.
Oh well, sorry, I derailed you.
Oh no, it's okay. But Soderbergh, it's a good derailment because Soderbergh is one of my favorite American auteur directors. He definitely has his own style of. He likes to use sort of broken. He likes to use a broken palette, and he likes that washed out look of sort of this Mexican dirty look to things, which Traffic exemplified really well. Contagion used it really well. He likes to shoot things on this crisp.
Oh, he made Contagion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Shoots things on like a crisp 35 millimeter, but makes it look like it's shot on video at the same time. He's a master of Steadicam. He's maybe arguably better with Steadicam than Michael Mann even is. And he does most of his cinematography himself. You'll actually see pictures of him on the set holding these giant Panavision cameras on his shoulders with two other people holding it simply because he wants his shot done his way. True auteur director. Really, I mean, really a genius. Even when he makes bad movies, they have his touch of greatness behind them. What else has he made?
No.
Anyway,
well, yeah,
you're
we
right.
We can figure that out.
Ted. Okay, Ted. I'm not gonna diss this movie. It could be really funny. There's a lot of people that are gonna love this movie. This movie is destined to become a cult classic. This is a comedy that people will still be talking about many years, no matter what I say, no matter what anyone says. Get those lights out of my face. So here's the storyline for anyone that doesn't know about it. Mark Wahlberg. I'll get you the official description from the studio. Won't that be nice?
And anyone who's listening, you can race Gabe to IMDb and see who gets there
Family
first.
Guy creator Seth MacFarlane, that's the guy who does most of the voices for the show and also created it, brings the boundary-pushing brand of humor to a big screen for the first time. Writer, director, and star of Ted in this live-action CG animated comedy. Mark Wahlberg, a grown man, must deal with his cherished teddy bear who came to life as a result of a childhood wish and has refused to leave ever since. Their bond is mostly around what you see in the posters. They like to pee in urinals together. Ted, his teddy bear, who has a sort of blank, mute expression on his face, a blank, very plain expression on his face, is potty-mouthed. He's crude. He smokes weed. He drinks. They're men. They are bros. But this movie ends up becoming actually a slightly poignant look at bromance versus romance. Stupid term, but realistic.
What film are you talking about?
I'm talking about Ted.
Ted.
A new film that's coming out by Seth MacFarlane, the creator, and the mind behind Family Guy.
Oh.
I'm just going to leave it there. I don't like Family Guy. I know you probably don't like Family Guy. A lot of people love Family Guy,
Can you
and
tell
that's
by my
fine.
reaction?
And that's fine. And that's just fine. Funny, but so here's what they're saying about the film. Funny, but inconsistent. Has heart and a surprising weird depth and a poignance throughout its original concept. That is startlingly original and consistently fun throughout the whole film. Unapologetic in its offensiveness, crude in its utter ridiculousness for fans of the concept, the trailer, and of Funly Guy. So, here's the thing. I'm sure it's really funny. I'm sure there's great moments in it.
Right.
But I don't care. I'm probably not going to see it. So you tell me how good it is, and I'll take your word for it. And I'm not going to criticize you because I can't, because I'm not going to go see it. I maybe will watch it on DVD at like 3 a.m. Maybe at some point. Part of me does want to know if it's good or if it's absolutely terrible. Because the trailer to me looked completely unfunny. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that I have a thing against Seth. Here's the thing. It's not that I have a grudge against Seth MacFarlane. It's not that I don't like Seth MacFarlane. If Family Guy was a really, really, really funny, brilliant show, I would love it. Mm-hmm. I would just think like, oh man, no, what he's doing is great. South Park is a consistently brilliant, funny, edgy show. Yeah. Even when it's sophomoric, dumb, and too plot focused, it's good. But
how'd you go to...
because Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy, is the guy who directed Ted. So what I'm saying is
But what did that have to do with South Park?
What I'm saying is because there's a common comparison between whether you're on the South Park side or whether you're on the Family Guy side.
Oh, okay.
There's this common like this versus that.
Uh-huh.
And there are some jokes in Family Guy that are absolutely brilliant. There are gags in Family Guy that are absolutely brilliant. There are moments of this offhand sort of consistent, broken down sort of stony bro humor, stony drunken humor that is really sort of offhand. It's slight. It's sometimes it's weirdly refreshing, and it's just sort of this like throw it at the wall and it comes back at you humor. But I want to see if possibly he can handle this in a different setting. If having the focus of directing a movie, of writing a movie, of having a beginning and an end, and having boundaries to not just being able to go anywhere like they do in Family Guy, if that will work in his favor. I personally think it will, because I think I see a lot of intelligence behind Seth MacFarlane, and I think given restraints and given a table to be tied down to, I think he's actually capable of being a lot funnier than that show is. The trailer I don't think is funny because it just doesn't make me laugh and it annoyed me. I think the concept is really funny. So we'll see what happens with that. You go find out and tell me how it is. Anyway, that is your box office and film news for June 29th. Yeah.
Okay, well, so now let's get to the crux of the show, what we were going to talk about.
This is kind of a hipster show.
Today's show is two different things. Dragon Slayer, which just came out on DVD, and then we're going to talk about Moonrise Kingdom.
The new Wes Anderson film. And we're going to talk about Wes Anderson.
And we'll talk a little bit about Wes Anderson. Hopefully we can fit it all in. I mean, Wes Anderson is definitely a whole show by himself, but this will at least we'll probably spend more time talking about that. Let's
talk about Dragon Slayer for maybe like 5 or 6 minutes. And so here are your notes.
So Dragon Slayer was just released on DVD, and do you want to describe it, Gabe?
Sure.
It's basically, or maybe I should describe it since I haven't talked that much.
Yeah.
What it is for people who haven't seen it or heard about it. It's a documentary about. It's funny. I hesitate on the word documentary because it felt very narrative narrative. But it's about these skateboarders in, I think, Orange County.
Screech Sandoval.
And this guy Screech,
who's a pretty
Sandoval,
who's somewhat of a famous,
somewhat of a legendary skater,
cult skater. He's kind of an underground he's considered odd style skater.
Okay, yeah. So these are things I didn't know, but because I didn't read the backstory or anything about it, and it just follows his life basically, right? For
it's a snapshot of his life for like a month
maybe
or
a year or so. Yeah, it's hard to tell how long.
It's about a month, I'd say.
You think so?
Yeah. It's a short period.
Yeah.
Because his son doesn't grow. His son doesn't age very
much.
Yeah,
that's true. His son doesn't
and
grow.
And that girl
2
doesn't
years.
get any more interesting from the beginning to the end. Even though I think she's cute as hell.
But anyway, I'm trying to find my notes. Oh, here they are. What did you think about the film? And I'll look for my notes.
Okay, here's the thing. I was bugging Zav to get this movie in so we could review it because he had one copy and people have been renting this movie like crazy from the store. So he's like, well, Gabe, it's not really a good idea to rent this because this movie is like hot. This movie's hot on the shelves and hot off the shelves. People are going crazy about it. And I'm like, well, yeah, I've been reading a lot about it. I think it's a good idea because it's a film that people have heard about, whether they've seen it or not, and it's a movie that some people have seen and that other people want to see. It's being talked about in a lot of different communities, film communities, skater communities, young youthful communities, and hipster communities. Admittedly, hipster communities. And so I was interested in this. I was told by several people whose opinions I respect to check this out. Before, I don't know if any of them saw it themselves, but they were like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be the movie to watch." And I got to say that just on a quick note before Zav tears into it, I really didn't. I was disappointed. I felt like this was a really calculated film. I felt like this was a really too edited, over edited, overlooked at, over created, over scrutinized. And the thing that I find sort of disarming was that last night my opinion about it was a little bit different. When I first got done watching it, I felt that it was a little bit. I felt like, oh, this is weirdly natural and dirty and ugly and unafraid to show the awfulness of life and sort of and sort of daring. And then I thought about it, I'm like, well, no, it's really not, because there's not only of their narrative films that I've seen, mainstream narrative films that do it a lot better, but I just didn't, in retrospect, this guy isn't really that interesting, nor is he a tragic figure, nor is he really a martyr, nor do I really respect him at all. Other than that, he can skate pretty well, and there's times when he gets so drunk that he can't do it. He can't do even what he's good at. Big frickin' whoop. I'm sorry. I've just seen this dramatized much better, and I've seen documentaries that were much more tragic than this, especially Cassavetes' ongoing legacy with that theme. And I just felt this movie ended up
with what theme?
With people just sort of losing, not being able to perform in what they're good at.
Like
whether it's just marriage, whether it's love,
or human type of story.
Exactly. And so I just felt this film was
a very human story in a sense.
I give it that.
I would, when I started watching it, I was very skeptical. So I have this kind of formula that if you go into a movie being really skeptical and expecting it to suck, or maybe not suck, but I didn't expect it to suck. I expected myself not to find it interesting, because I've just seen way too many skateboard movies. And not only are skateboard movies popular in the sort of mainstream sense of big movies that get to cinemas, but also in terms of local film people, film makers. It's a really common, like, zombie movies and skateboarder documentaries are some of the most popular subjects that student filmmakers do. So I've seen a lot of
it's easy
students,
and it's go-to, yeah.
Yeah, people really love documenting skateboarding. And if you've never skateboarded like me, and I mean, I tried, but it just wasn't my thing. I never was good at it, and I just didn't take to it. And I never quite understood it, because it doesn't go as fast as a bike, and it doesn't so it's not as maybe I'm too literal minded about it, but like it doesn't functionally. I've never understood the skateboard, because you have to kick to skateboard, and I never really connected with it. And this is dating back to, like, when I was a kid in the 70s, and so I've never had much of a thing for skateboarding movies. Anyway, when I went into this, I didn't expect much, and I can say pretty honestly, it delivered a little more than I expected. It didn't, like, blow my mind in any way. I wasn't taken by surprise and like awakened by this movie. I think if you're a skateboard fan, you're gonna love this movie, probably, unless you're, I don't know.
It's a pretty artistic.
Unless you have other interests in life than skateboarding in a way. I mean, there's something about it it's almost like you have to. In order to appreciate this kind of movie, you also have to appreciate skateboarding
and
a little more than the norm or something. You have to be kind of like extra into it or something, because it's sort of like the motivation of the movie without an explanation of why it's the motivation. Like, if it was a narrative film, it's not, it's a documentary. You would need to sort of establish, and say you were making this movie for people who had never skateboarded in their lives. You'd need to sort of like establish, why is this such an important thing to people? Why do so many people spend so much of their time on this one activity? Because it doesn't really go anywhere. It's not art, it's not poetry, because you can't take it and put it, I mean, it is in a certain way, but I would say it's a sport. It's a sport.
It is. It's a sport.
And it's a sport that's got a nice kind of gritty aspect to it. It's not like downhill skiing that's sort of elitist. It's not like long distance running, which is has a different thing about it. It's got a dirtiness about it. You can smoke cigarettes and be a drunk and be a skateboarder. It's a little bit like being a pool shark or something. And that's what this guy is. I mean, I've never seen so much pot smoking in one. I haven't seen so much
pot smoking in a movie.
So many different bongs and devices for smoking pot. So it's definitely not a movie for little kids. And maybe it is. I don't know. It depends on how liberated you are as a parent. And there's a lot of drinking, and it's not really critical of that. It never says, like, this is not.
It shows it pretty unglamorously. It shows that pot just, like, they're just like these sort of like just. It shows that after they get high, they're pretty boring. They're just, the characters just don't have much to say, and they're just kind of like.
I mean, there's something about being a pothead that, let's face it, a lot of potheads are people who don't do a whole lot with their lives, And I mean, there are notable exceptions, you know, a lot of notable exceptions. But let's face it, pot does kind of take the edge off of people. It makes
Absolutely.
people a little bit boring. And yeah, I could see
I agree.
if you're just stoned all the time, skateboarding would be pretty awesome, I suppose, you know, because it's just a totally visceral experience. You're just traveling through space and you're, you know, so I mean, in a certain way, I suppose it makes it interesting.
You. I just love you for just the fact that you are saying all
What I
things.
liked about this film is it kind of marks a cultural type, a cultural moment in American history. It's not the Z-Dog, what is it?
Dogtown and Z-Boys era?
Dogtown and Z-Boys era.
It's not
this
the
is the
70s
next
era.
generation of the, or
And this is the
next,
norm.
next
And this is
generation.
kind of like kind of the depressing norm.
But these kids have kind of like an anarchist, crusty punk aspect to them. They're sort of, that was the most
But
interesting
they've sort of
thing.
mechanized it.
It's interested in seeing the cross-pollination of the anarchist, sort of anti-corporate, anarchist, dumpster diving, you know, skeptical, politically skeptical sort of aspect. And punk, but punk, see, I think anarchists aren't punks necessarily. Punks are predate the anarchists today. I mean, the clothing style, the kinds of kids you see, the kids you see who are under the black flag of anarchism are different from the Sex Pistols era punk. You see what I'm saying? I mean, even though they sing
around this, I mean,
they sing about anarchy, but what I'm saying is it's generational. It's more of a cultural thing. I'm not saying that
it's all sort of melded into one sort of honestly corporate image. It's actually manufactured.
no, it's the
now.
opposite. I mean, it's anti-corporate.
Well,
It's
they think it
extremely
is, but it's all
anti-corporate.
it's marketed.
It can be commodified. Here's an example.
It's always commodified.
Here's an example. I mean, this Dragon Slayer is obviously. I mean, it's first run features.
First run features, and it's meant to make money.
And its goal is to make money. It's a product to be sold in the marketplace. Yes, but at the same time, anyway, it's interesting to see that cross pollination because when I look at things like Dogtown and Z-Boy, that's one thing that I really find annoying about those people is that they're completely apolitical, and that always makes me skeptical of any cultural norm is when people are completely apolitical. And so it's nice to see they have a kind of political thing, but at the same time they often reiterate the fact that they don't know anything about politics and they don't care. But of course, everything, you know, it's that thing. Everything's political. So being like openly
Apolitical is your stance.
Taking that stance is a kind of a political stance.
Well, anyway, that was our review of Dragon Slayer.
Wait, I'm not done reviewing that.
You're not done?
No.
Oh Jesus.
Let me see. I liked the editing. You didn't like the editing, but I actually thought that the editing was somewhat interesting, and yet at the same time, it seemed like an idea that the editor had, where they kind of were like breaking up the film.
What do you think about the numbers?
With notes?
Yeah,
yes, it was like notes, like sketch notes in a notebook. If you were directing or if you were editing a documentary, and then you sat down and said, okay, I'm going to divide it into 10 chapters, and then I'm going to sort of cover a different aspect of this person in those 10 chapters. Okay. And then they look at their notebook and they're like, hey, maybe I'll type these titles into the edit. And then they were like, and what I'll do is I'll stop the movie and put the title up, and it became part of it. I might be wrong, but this is my sense of it, is that the editor was fooling around and stumbled on that. And then it did the job of stirring the pot a little bit, or of breaking up the monotony of what it would have been otherwise, which is basically a very, very typical documentary of this era. Is a very typical, the music that they use is, I feel bad because I don't remember specifically, but I do remember thinking,
I knew about half the songs.
This kind of music is always typically used in this kind of documentary. The editing style, the camera work, it's all very, very status quo. Very, very much the kind of thing you see in many, many documentaries.
And even when there's these gorgeous backdrops, these gorgeous settings, it's almost just sort of like throwaway impressionism. It's gorgeous and it's of the moment, but there's nothing more to it than prettification of things. And you pointed this out to me yesterday when I was like, well, I thought she was actually pretty interesting. You said, why? She stood around, didn't say anything, and was pretty. And I realized that I was totally fooled by her, that that's exactly what she was. And I think that was my anger after we talked about that with the movie in general, was that it stood around, was pretty, and it didn't do a whole lot.
Right. I
I mean, that was supposed to be sort of this
she
sort of
got
fuck you
I
attitude
mean,
about it. But
in
it's just
two
like, who
in two
cares?
ways she was boring. On the one hand, maybe she just was not that interesting of a person because these are young people. Let's face it. They're young people who have not really had
underneath it. I thought that she was his
she's-
conscience. She was his conscience.
No,
by far.
definitely. She's a very, she could be an incredibly interesting person. I don't even know. But the documentarians didn't get more than like 5 sentences out of her in the film. My favorite moment is in the movie when they're in the drive-in movie and they're sitting together and it gets really, really intimate to the point, and I don't mean they are being intimate, but the camera is intimate with their coupledom in a way that you rarely see in films because most people would say, hey, like, enough
Fuck
with the
off.
camera right now.
I'm sorry, screw off.
And so that part was, they must have really followed these guys around for a long time
I get
with
the
video
feeling
camera.
that they did it. They were so comfortable because there's a lot of uncomfortable emotional nudity in the film that I admire. But I mean, like, she does say very little, but when she does, I mean, I really feel like she said a lot more than all of his gurgling and rambling and drunken stumblingness. She like when he's like that scene when he's drunk and he's wasted. He's like, "Why did you let me get this drunk?" He goes, "Let's get a dog and ditch it." And she goes, "You shouldn't do that. If you get a dog and take on that kind of responsibility, you have to accept that you're stuck with it and you have to take care of it."
Yeah.
And then she looks at him and all of a sudden has this moment where it sort of seeps to the camera.
Yeah,
like-
but I mean-
and then she realizes, oh my God, you have a almost 1-year-old child.
Yeah, yeah. But
You know.
okay, but I mean, I'm assuming you would have said the same thing in the same situation. I mean, it's not like that makes her a brilliant person.
But she
that
says
she
it in this-
calls
but
him
she
on
doesn't
his
just rattle
bogus
on
and-
about stuff.
No,
she
she's-
chooses her sentences.
Yeah,
I admired that.
Yeah.
I really
no,
did.
she's that is the kind of person that this girlfriend. We're talking about the girlfriend of Screech in Dragon Slayer, and Screech is. Let's admit he's a visually very stunning person.
Oh,
he has a
yeah.
very amazing nose and he has the buck teeth and he's visually pretty interesting and fun to look at. But in the end, it's pretty one-dimensional. It's depressing because when I look at the future, it just looks bad. You know, it looks grim. This guy's an alcoholic. He's basically already a has-been.
And
You
a
know, he's
child.
becoming a has-been already, and he's young. He's in his early 20s, so it's hard to see where it's going to go. And in addition to it, he's pretty fatalistic. So, 20 years from now, I think it's going to be a very depressing. He's going to be depressing, like some of those characters in Dragon. Why do I keep calling
Dragon Ball. It's in Dragon Ball Z. No, in Dogtown and Z.
Dogtown and Z Boys and
Dragon.
other movies about like surfing and God, there's so many documentaries about this kind of stuff.
About
It just
surfing, yeah.
drives me.
I
up the
actually
wall.
think the surfing documentary.
It's this American thing. I wonder. Is there an equivalent in Russia? Is there an equivalent in Chinese culture or British culture of this kind of obsession with something that just doesn't? It's like this retooling of this thing that doesn't really do anything. I mean, it's just. It's all.
It's an appreciated art
pure,
form, Zav, though.
It's kind of a pure sort of Zen experience,
It
and
is.
Again, maybe I'm just too pragmatic to get what the deal is with skateboarding, but I just never have completely gotten it.
It's about doing.
So I'm a bad critic for a skateboard
It's physically
movie.
demanding, and it takes a lot of there's a lot of immediacy because to even like move your skateboard from point A
No,
to
no,
point B
I understand that.
is really hard.
I
but
understand
to do specific
that,
tricks
yeah.
and to.
No, I understand, but that makes it just more depressing to me.
I'm sorry. Okay, so
Anyway,
but Zav, I will agree that everything you said, in some way, shape, or form, I actually agree with in a lot. But I don't necessarily. I haven't said it because in some ways, I have wanted to look at it from the other perspective. I don't get skateboarding either. I've never gotten it. But there are things about skateboarding documentary. There are moments of absolute beauty that I've seen. There's one in particular that Spike Jonze produced that was absolutely a moving work of art. There's a movie where they travel around Australia that had some of the best cinematography I've ever seen in a movie ever. And Beauty and the Beast 1 and 2 are both amazing as well. But those are 4 films in literally a catalog of millions. So, with that being said, Dragon Slayer. So what else are we going to do? We're going to talk about Moonrise Kingdom that we just saw with my father, Mr. David Van Handel, in the theater. And oh, man. Wes Anderson's newest. Wes Anderson in general. Jesus. A body of work, an ideology, a filmmaker.
Really, an ideology?
An ideology of quirkiness. An ideology of humanistic quirkiness.
See,
and it could you could go so much worse.
I'll argue
than
that I don't think anyone sets out to be quirky in this world. being a
does.
person who's called quirky.
Yeah.
I don't think you
And
ever
that's-
decide you want to be quirky. You just people call you quirky. It's not something you.
that's
And if you're
exactly-
trying to be quirky, then it's really, really obvious.
See, and that's one of my criticisms about what I even love about this stuff is that it's obvious and it's always an attempt. There's always this knowingness to his movies, and there's always this structure, this outline to okay, we're gonna make quirky stuff that's gonna make people laugh, and it's gonna be so silly, but it's gonna be real deadpan. You know what's up? It's a formula that works for me, and I like it. I see through it.
I just would argue that I don't think that he intends to be quirky. I think that he is genuine, and I think that every person, if they were as genuine as Wes Anderson, and I'm not lauding him. I don't think he's a god of any kind, but I'm just saying anyone, any person who has a voice and expresses themselves in a kind of fully, or as fully as we ever see it done, is going to be considered quirky in a sense.
Sure.
You know, I mean, you could say that almost any filmmaker or artist who has really cut out a corner of like, okay, this is that kind of person's films, and that person kind of made a name for themselves, is going to be considered quirky unless by some strange, bizarre coincidence, everything that they like and they genuinely like it and they're genuinely talking from the heart, if by some pure odd coincidence it's the status quo thing, and then no one will think it's quirky because that's what everyone does.
It's already like the guy who directs the Jim Carrey movies or the guy that directs the Adam Sandler movies consistently. But yes, I agree with you that Kubrick-esque, Anderson-esque,
right,
Soderbergh-esque,
right.
These are definitely like pronounced films with pronounced even
Errol Morris,
Errol Morris,
Herzog,
Morris-esque. Herzog-esque.
You know,
I actually
every one of
oversay that phrase.
Any director who's really made a name, and again, it's like I don't even I wouldn't stop at any genre or any art form. It's like you can say the same thing about Miles Davis. Everyone is okay. Maybe quirky isn't always attributed to those kinds of people, but once in a while, when you do something that's just your own voice, and this is what I felt came from the Wes Anderson film tonight for me, is I felt like I was living in his world for a minute and living in his vision of, in his worldview. And so that I would say more than I would, when you said ideology, I feel like ideology is something different. Ideology is a way of living that you adopt, that you say, okay, I like that, and I'm gonna put that badge on myself. I'm gonna wear that hat. That's ideology to me. Where someone like Wes Anderson, it's not ideology. He's just literally looking at what excites him, what motivates him, how he's been for. And of course, I haven't read a biography of him. I don't know his background, so all of this is speculation. But I just am speculating that he makes really one kind of film over and over again. That's a very typical thing of many auteur directors, like Woody Allen,
Howard Hawks. Ozu made the same film over and over again.
Yeah, is a great example. Almost any great director, it's just if you're really honest with yourself, you really only have one thing to say, which is who the thing that comes to you, in your minds. And his films are just, the same elements repeat themselves in all his films, and it shows, and some of those elements are incredible set design, like really, really high concept, highly chosen. I mean, some of those locations are just like, how did he do that? Without computer generating some of these things? It's so picture perfect. It looks like a painting. Another filmmaker who uses color as well is Spike Lee, I think. But his color is just so stunning. It's just like, wow. And then it just gets better and better as technology gets, more vivid. You just have these incredibly vivid locations.
Vintage colors, sort of like vintage clothing,
yeah,
vintage furniture, on everything.
His films and he's very particular about things that are in the mise en scène. He's a master.
The composition. He's a master compositionist, especially with symmetry, with symmetrical design, and with broken symmetry, where things are within the frame, conceptualized within a certain set of lines, but they are slightly different on the left and on the right, up and bottom.
Yeah.
And I think in this movie there were really poignant, really powerful moments in it, like the scene when Bill Murray and Frances McDormand are laying in bed and they're having that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very very funny but touching and very genuine scene about American marriage. That's very relatable.
Or marriage in general.
Marriage in general. And I just was like, this is such a freaking touching movie. There's so many scenes in there. I mean, okay, I'll admit it. The movie never made me cry, but it was a very powerful film.
No, in fact, the times where I was supposed to cry, I was like, I'm not going to cry.
I'm not going to cry.
I'm not going to cry to that.
Well,
I'm not going to let them manipulate me.
I'm not going to let them manipulate me. But I also felt that there was like a lot of like grown-up romance with these. Okay, so the plot of the film, in case you don't know, is on an island somewhere in America. They're literally an island on like I guess like the Northeast. And it takes place in the early 60s. A boy who's part of the Boy Scouts, the Khaki Scouts, decides to run away after a year-long pen pal relationship with another girl who lives on the island, who he met the previous year at summer camp, and they decide to run away together on this island that they're on, and because of his outdoor skills, they're able to survive for a while, while his Boy Scout troop and Boy Scout leader and her parents and family and everyone caught in the middle tries to find them and dispel their marriage. And it's similar, like a kind of like a Romeo and Juliet situation in some ways, but also it's modeled around some of the operas of Benjamin Britten, which is actually referenced directly in the film, and not only in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And there's Benjamin Britten music that plays throughout the film. Benjamin Britten was a composer who made music that was meant to be performed by non-professional choirs in churches, in large halls, and tell not only biblical stories, but stories about sort of how they related to the common people in some ways. Wrote very strange American operas.
Yeah, and I just want to throw in that's another thing, after mise-en-scène and design, production design or whatever, music is something that he's always just... He's like Quentin Tarantino in that way, where it's just like you see a movie, a Wes Anderson movie, and then all of a sudden people are wanting to buy that music, or all of a sudden are like, how did this music exist and I didn't never hear it before?
Both vintage and created for the film soundtrack, and original music and previously recorded music.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think the only person who rivals him is Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you say about the school of filmmaking? I mean, I've said this before on the show about that cinema is divided up clearly into two schools, I believe, in some ways, into the pre and post Tarantino age. In terms of Tarantino creating this niche of sort of this like retro nostalgia, creating new things based on nostalgic love and values. I feel that certain
and casting, his casting was very new. But yeah, nostalgic, and I would say actually, I think John Waters predated him, and John Waters has done a lot more fun and creative casting.
Would you say though that Anderson falls into a similar category? I would say not only in terms of like striking a chord with the public and with culture, both like counterculture reaching into the mainstream culture, but with like creating this niche of like taking the old and making it like trendy and new, which is why I consider him a very hipster filmmaker, because he takes vintage clothing, he takes the vintage looks, he takes this vintage idea, colors, scape, and he presents it as something, and literally he presents these things that the mainstream cinema just does not show, and it's new, it's bold, it's daring.
Right.
It is hipster cinema, but at the same time I feel that in a lot of ways before him there really wasn't anything like him. Before Wes Anderson.
Not Quentin Tarantino. Okay.
Before Wes Anderson created like this Wes Anderson niche with like, I'd say like Rushmore, the Royal Tenenbaums, and especially with Steve Zissou, that look and that feel, that acidy sort of like stony, washed out feeling, and that sort of like that balls out anarchism to the film. Like just anything is possible. Just watch. You dare me? You dare me to go that crazy? I just went there.
Yeah.
I just feel like there's a lot of insanity, but a lot of like precise genius in his work, and that maybe is unparalleled. What are your feelings?
Well, I think that the things you're saying are all kind of, I see how you're saying them. I would contextualize it differently, and I think it's kind of, I would just be repeating myself, but basically that, to me, what I see when I see a Wes Anderson film is someone who is completely honest with himself about what he likes. He's really, really more than that. I mean, it's not just being honest with yourself, but like he's just highly attuned to these interests that are his own, that come I believe he's it's always about when he was younger. This is my, again, like, speculation, but
He's from a divorced family, and he said that that's the main influence on his life was his parents' divorce and growing up in a family.
and also, I mean, I'm imagining he must have come from a family somewhat similar to these, like, exaggerated versions,
Tenenbaums, he
like
said, is very
something
personal.
like a family of wealthy people in this sort of like the Hamptons or whatever it is, and everyone is just like highly educated, and he's, of course, he's a brilliant filmmaker. He was a brilliant child, probably, probably one of those children who's like so precocious and so smart, and he's outsmarting all the grown-ups around him, and I think that that's probably truly the kind of person he was, and he's of that, his films are very much of that class. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's very class oriented in the sense of it never really strays from that world, or the people who aren't of that sort of ilk of highly educated American, the American, like, intellectual elite are kind of like in the margins in all his films. They're just odd curiosities.
Odd Curiosity, I would totally and completely agree with him.
Yeah. Except for Bottle
Fixations.
Rocket. Bottle Rocket feels like regular dudes
That's a
or something.
filthy, awesome movie that a lot of people cite as like completely different from his other works.
Yeah.
Because it not only budget restraints, but like that's like a really daring movie that it feels like a bunch of people just went out and made, and it happened to be beautiful and like really
Very well written,
very well and
acted.
extremely well captured.
Yeah.
And just I think that when you watch his films in continuity, and when you look at them and how they're made and what their final product really is, he really is evolving as a filmmaker in that he does less cuts. And every film that he makes, there are less literal edits, there are less jumps, there are less shots. And I think that there's like sort of this, and in this film, what I saw was a very Japanese style with Moonrise Kingdom. His pans from left to right, physical pans, like tracking shots, very Mitsuguchi-esque, very Mitsuguchi and Kurosawa-esque. And when he did those low line shots that were low to the floor and eye level shots, Ozu. I just saw a complete structured, very parallel and perpendicular, very parallel lines, and then if things moved, it was always 90-degree angles. There's always this like right angle mentality to it, very Ozu, very Japanese, but maybe just a little cleaner. I just felt like I didn't feel dirty when I walked out of this movie. I just was like, that wasn't the best movie of the year. That wasn't even the greatest. That wasn't the best movie and I've seen in a while, but it was just so damn giddy and charming and sweet. And it's like,
I wanted to point this out, and sorry, I'm stepping on you, but I'm actually embellishing what you're saying. I was talking to Dan and Isabel about this. It made me feel so awkward when the audience clapped, but it does say a lot about a movie that the audience clapped at the end of the film.
At the credits, yeah.
I don't know, when's the last time you've seen that happen?
At the end of Requiem for a Dream, I remember it happened that people were sobbing and people were crying. There was a woman who had to be helped out of for this. She came to the movie by herself, and a member of who worked at an employee at the Downer had to physically help her out of her seat because she was emotionally destroyed. She couldn't even drive home. They had to call a cab for her. I was in 8th grade when I saw that movie with my mom.
That says a lot about a movie. I mean, maybe this woman was imbalanced.
But that movie I saw people
but I do have to say that on the one hand, it makes me feel like, okay, that says a lot about a film that the audience clapped. I don't know if, I know for a fact
at
that
the Downer it happens.
The other film that I saw, the other films of Wes Anderson's I've seen, the audience didn't clap. I think personally this was one of my favorites of his films, personally. But I also am reluctant because I know that we just saw this movie like at 7 p.m. and now it's 11:51, so it's 3 or 4 hours ago. I need a movie to I need a couple days, a week, month, and my opinion of a movie changes a lot over time. But I do have to say this was very good. It was very good. Like the whole time, he's always giving you more. He's always, he gives you a normal scene, but then he adds something that you don't expect.
Characterization too.
With the kid. There's so many of these things, and probably a lot that I didn't even consciously, notice, but. where you have, it's good enough. The scene is good enough just the way it stands. And then he adds this funny little touch at the end, like when the kid with the eye patch turns after I forget what, he blows a bugle or something, and then you see the eye patch.
Spits. He spits.
Or the kiss.
The kid with the trumpet, the kiss, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and then there's a kiss where they have this first kiss, and then he spits.
I had sand in my mouth.
And then he says, I had sand in my mouth. So then it's like, oh, he didn't spit because of that. But, your first immediate reaction is it's a boy kissing a girl, and girls are dirty, like girl germs or whatever. And then you find out,
really
he's
sweet.
it's actually like,
really sweet.
It's just real or something.
Yeah.
It seems like, where do you come up with that? Like extra little, he always gives you those little extra twists, which I think is
humanistic.
That really sets him apart from all the other kinds of movies you see.
Absolutely.
He gives you something extra a lot. And I think that's, that shows, I think there must be a lot of painstaking work that goes into these films.
I've heard his productions are absolutely maddening because he's so involved in every process. In fact, I was going to talk about this. 2 points. One, I was talking about this with my father after the movie. I said, all these movies would even work as a play, because it's all about set design and and character interaction within the set or the setting, and action with other characters within the setting. It's all character based. It's all based on the characters constantly being reinvented,
right?
And moving forward and progressing the plot at the same time, which are the dynamics of screenwriting. Also.
Yeah, it was well scripted too. I mean, they definitely kind of set up the narrative in a way that was. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
You didn't finish your point?
The second comment, which I was talking about, was I was under the impression that he was like Darren Aronofsky, who works with pretty much the same crew on every film after film, with Pi and Requiem for a Dream, and I don't believe with I believe he's changed up his crew now with Black Swan, but I believe up until The Wrestler. No, I know at least with his first 2 movies, when he set himself up as a credible voice, he worked with like the same sound effects engineer, the same editor, the same cinematographer, the same crew. Yeah. And I was under the impression that Wes Anderson did the same thing. Well, I looked up the credits, the full cast and credits under all these films. The only thing that is consistent, I don't know where I got that information from because it's wrong, is that Robert Yeoman is this guy that he works on, that's his cinematographer in every film. And so that's a huge part of the movie, is the way it physically looks, is the cinematography. I'm sorry. It's such a main component. But literally the music, Mark Mothersbaugh did music on 2 of his movies. I was under the impression that the costume designer, this woman, was the same one from Bottle Rocket into Tenenbaums into Rushmore. Turns out she only did Bottle Rocket and Rushmore, and then after that, it's been a different person on every film. Same set design's been different, production design's been different.
He's different. Maybe he's hard to work with.
I would imagine, because look
or
at
maybe
the painstaking
or
detail.
maybe he gets rid of people.
Well,
I don't know.
Andy does all the drugs too. He's real crazy. But
wait. You can say that out loud.
He's personally said that Steve Zissou and other films were, depending on the films, were drug related and drug inspired. He's come out and said that the Darjeeling Limited, like the amount of opiums and opiates that they use in that film, is literally inspired by what he went through when he wrote that film and what he did while they were making the film. He was on a lot of opium. He was smoking tons of opium in that period. Yeah. So that accounts for a lot of, like, the soundtrack in that movie is influenced by that. The look of that film, the trains moving, the use of motion, the use of dialogue, the sort of sleepiness to that film, the laid backness to feeling, but strange, like, backwards uptightness is all related to, like,
the only thing that I feel when I see his films,
all acid.
What I feel is a highly someone who is extremely solipsistic, because all his characters are as well, but also someone who is very tuned in to everything. In other words, has experiences things in a heightened way. That's what his films feel like a heightened attention to all the little details, and like he knows what he likes about details. So he knows, if it's going to be the kids are playing a board game, it's Parcheesi, and it's a Parcheesi board from the 50s. I mean, it's not a great example, but anyway,
I know exactly.
It's just there's some every little thing is heightened. It's like it has that kind of excitement that you have that a child's eyes have of the world around them. Everything's
illuminated and beautiful.
Yeah, and I feel like he's just really his work just keeps staying in that world of being a child. And I feel like, this it was ambitious, the love story, doing a love story between two children.
Two 12-year-olds.
Very well done. And I don't mean it like, I don't know. It's also funny, and it's also like, it's like real, or so. It's kind of like what it feels like to fall in love when you're 12. That's what it felt like to me.
But at the same time,
But it didn't have like there's like the Bridge to Terabithia or something where it's kids falling in love. It feels like an adult wrote it for kids, where this feels like a kid is writing it, but they have the tools of an adult. And I feel like that's what's great about a lot of great artists and a lot of great filmmakers, is if they're able to channel their childhood all the way into adulthood, and they're able to go back there to that time and bring it to us, but they have the tools that an adult has. And his films are so often about that, about a young man with his first sort of crack at love, or whatever, what do you call it? His first sort of a young man in love for the first time, and he's chasing after some woman, some slightly older in this case, or in other cases, it's like his teacher or whatever. But he's just so enamored, cocky and so precocious that he's actually gonna like date his teacher, his 30-year-old teacher, like, or something like that. And I just think that's really, it's a really amazing rare thing for a director to be able to do. And actually, who does it well also is Spielberg, I think.
The work of intelligent children, the look from children done intelligently.
Yeah, I think occasionally Spielberg manages to actually transport us into the world, transport himself, transport us by transporting himself back to how childhood feels and what the world looks like to a child. And he does it fairly successfully. I think that this film does it way better, because he's not afraid to disappoint audiences. He's not afraid. He's not trying to kiss.
Not afraid to lose money.
He's not trying to kiss everyone's ass. He's not as much of a businessman. He's an artist more.
He's a genuine artist.
And like Spielberg is really almost more a businessman first, artist second, kind of.
Reference our Spielberg show.
Yeah, right. Go back to our Spielberg show. Even though I didn't talk much about that in that film. I mean, in that show. But I wanted to say one last thing about that, but I don't know. Maybe I talked too much.
No, please keep going. Everything you're saying is freaking amazing right now. So if you're just joining us, that's
I think we are right around at an hour right now.
Well,
so maybe
we started like 1:08.
Yeah.
We started at 11:08, right?
11:08, and it's 11:59. Oh, right. We have
like 8 minutes, dude.
Oh, cool. All right.
So let's talk about maybe some other Anderson films. So here's the Anderson breakdown.
Oh, you want me to tell you?
Can you look them up on IMDb in case I miss anything?
Well, yeah, I bet we can do it from memory, though.
Bottle Rocket, 1997. Rushmore, 1998. And then he did the Royal Tenenbaums in 2001, but it was released late in 2001. It mostly hit its stride in early 2002. And then he did The Life Aquatic.
I think so.
2004. And then he did The Fantastic Mr. Fox. And then he did... No, I'm sorry. And then he did the Darjeeling Limited.
That's the one everyone always that we keep forgetting, or you keep forgetting.
And then The Fantastic Mr. Fox in 2009.
His filmography is actually pretty small in a way.
But it's really...
But it's been consistent. He made a film in 94, 96, 98. Oh, no, wait. I'm sorry. 96, 98, 2001, 2004, 2007... 2009, 2012. So it's every, every 2 or 3
years
or
so, yeah.
Yeah, and he's not pumping out a movie every year, which is probably partly why his stuff is good. And I bet that the money that goes into it is a lot too. But yeah, it's and he's working on a film called Cousin. Oh, it's a short called Cousin Ben Troop Screening. With Jason Schwartzman.
These small
okay, that's a short that must go with Moonrise Kingdom.
He makes stuff for the DVDs a lot of time, and he makes films about the films. Yeah. He and Tarantino are both really into that, about making films about the content within their films. They're both like super hardcore about it because they live so much in the world that's inside their film. Yeah. They eat, breathe, and
right.
I mean everything.
Yeah.
But Bottle Rocket was a film that when it came out, a lot of people, a lot of critics especially, were really excited about this movie because there was like a danger and an intensity to it, a freshness, a rawness, and a youthful sort of intelligent vigor that had been missing from a lot of the films that were. There was this like spur of like American independent cinema that happened like in the like 94, 95, 96, 97. Like Killing Zoe was part of that spree. That was a British film. Mike Lee sort of ushered in that age with that sort of nonchalant dialogue-driven film.
Right.
John Sayles was a big part of that too. His sort of second wave, the post-Matewan age, Passion Fish, and that sort of cinema. And then Mike Lee with Secrets and Lies and the post-Naked era. And, you know, there was this sort of need and want and calling for it. And some of the cinema wasn't all that great. Like there was some gay cinema that came out that became popular around that era, like Go Fish. Or I'm trying to remember what the other.
Wait, but what's the point that you're getting at?
But what I'm saying is that this film did it. This film was the real deal, and it didn't care that it was. It just was. It was shot. It was shot with like no budget. It was like I think like $500,000.
Yeah.
And they got James Caan on board because it was such a good screenplay.
Yeah.
And then they were like, okay, here's a raw talent. We'll see where he goes. The road that he went down was totally and completely unexpected. I mean, like from that to Rushmore is like night and day difference.
Well, I'll tell you something. Biking back and talking to Dan Ullman about it, who's my friend, and he's also makes films and stuff. And we were talking about Wes Anderson, and one of the things that we talked about is, or maybe it was more me, but Dan as well, is just that there's the dark side or the ugly side of this is that he is defining a kind of a new style, which isn't so new anymore, obviously, because he's been doing it for over a decade now. But that style is probably already, you know, it's been co-opted in a lot of films already.
It's like the mainstream indie look now, sort of. Like
and it's nice when Wes Anderson does it, but when other people start co-opting it, it's gonna just be you're gonna want to shoot him for creating it because his stuff. It's just there's something, and also it's being co-opted by the advertising agencies and all the. What was Dan gonna say? Oh yeah, and then you're gonna see it in TV.
Harmony Korine is similar, which we did a show on 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, but it's hard to co-opt Harmony Korine. You know what I'm saying?
He's directed all those advertisements.
Well, he directed ads, and his ads.
But his style.
But his ad. Okay, I would say Harmony Korine's ads look a little bit like Wes Anderson's films. They're extremely well done in a Wes Anderson way, but it's a Harmony Korine style.
You know who else I would say falls in the category is Robert Rodriguez with Sin City.
Yeah.
There were a lot of movies that really tried to like amplify that look that he had with it.
Yeah.
There was a flashback scene in the movie Shooting Aces, which was just one of the most pathetic things I'd ever seen in my life. Like, and there were a couple other films that did The Spirit, which Frank Miller, who was the co-director of Sin City, directed on his own, which is just unwatchable, unpalatable. But Robert Rodriguez has that too, where people want what he has.
Yeah.
They want that dangerous sort of I don't give a shit mentality that's present in Sin City, that's in Desperado, that's in El Mariachi, except that when you replicate it and try to release it straight to DVD with David Caruso starring in it, it just doesn't work.
Well, I feel like Robert Rodriguez is boring.
What?
I mean, I think that his films are a boring version of his. El Mariachi is the only one I like, and I feel like it's all hype. Because it wasn't made on a tiny budget the way that they pretend, and it's like this emblematic film of making a film with $7,000 or some baloney figure like that, and there's no way it was made for that kind of budget. And the reason why it was made with a low budget is everyone gave him free stuff, but it was done extremely professionally, and then the sound mix. You know, if you ever see it without the sound mix, it makes a huge difference. But anyway, I really did like El Mariachi. And I guess you do see the talent in him. But
VCR editing at its best, except it wasn't edited on VCRs, but that's where he learned his craft.
There's so much hype around him. I really dislike when, especially as a person who's made films for, with nothing out of my pocket, it irritates me when I see a film like El Mariachi claiming to be done with like $7,000. You got to be joking.
It's actually like $100,000 at the minimum.
Yeah.
Or $1 million,
Give me a break. Yeah. Oh, yeah. If everybody gives you free stuff.
And it's all your family. But
and you're hooked in with the film industry.
Well, everything was his family and friends, too.
Yeah. But he must have been hooked into the film industry in Mexico or something.
Television stuff.
Something. So
like
he was able.
Television and radio, yeah. Similar to how the guy who Inarritu, was a really huge radio DJ
Mhm.
in Mexico. He's the guy who makes those annoyingly poetic films, Babel,
Uh-huh.
Babel, and Amores Perros,
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
and the other unwatchable films about the synchronicity and the string theory of Mexican life.
Uh-huh.
Give me a freaking break. Anyway,
All of a sudden we're both going down this dark path.
down this dark path of hating,
next
hating
week,
the superstars of independent cinema.
So that pretty much wraps it up, right? We've kind of
much.
covered that.
Pretty much
Even though
does.
I think we could probably have another show all about Wes Anderson, but
easily.
I don't know. Maybe we'll
think
just
we're
wait
good.
till next time,
I
in
think we're
3
good,
years
dog.
from now when he makes
So-
his next film.
Yeah. So next week we're doing a big show on Hollis Frampton, who is an important experimental filmmaker.
Right. Or on a DVD box set, or it's a 2-disc compilation of Hollis Frampton's work that we will review. But we're also going to review another movie, and I don't know what it is.
The Savages, which is Oliver Stone's new film about 2 drug dealers who say screw it, and they go to Mexico and they start killing killing everyone. Because,
yeah.
Because there's a love triangle involving a woman, and they're like, nah, you screw with the wrong pot dealers. Selma Hayek is the head of the cartel down there, and Benicio del Toro is also in it. So you got some superstars of like Mexican crossover cinema that's in it, and Oliver Stone. Okay, here's the thing. The guy's gone down a really crappy, really mainstream path for a while. He made World Trade Center. W was a really strangely like loving movie. He was actually like, for someone who's so whose politics are so like dangerous and unmainstream, he really was sentimental towards George W. Bush. But this movie is back to the Oliver Stone that's actually worth watching. Apparently, Warner Brothers saw a first.
Now, how do you know this without having seen it, Gabe?
Because here's what I'm about to tell you: is Warner Brothers Pictures saw the first rough cut of the film when he hadn't even incorporated, I think, 2/3 of the footage, and they said no, because this was originally going to be a fall release date.
Yeah.
They had a modest budget. They said no, this is a summer release date. This is going to be this is a great movie. It wasn't because they thought, oh, this is going to make a lot of money. Our advertising campaign is going to be good.
Oh, really?
They knew that this was going to be a word-of-mouth hit, and that this movie was going to become a cult phenomenon. That was literally the words that came out of the studio exec's
We
mouth.
shall see.
So we're going to see that, and we're going to have Carl Bogner on the show, hopefully with
Ashley Coffey.
Ashley Coffey.
With Ashley Coffey.
With Ashley Coffey to talk about student filmmaking in Milwaukee and student filmmaking in general, y'all. It's
Okay,
gonna be
thank you.
awesome.
Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for putting up with my grumpiness tonight.
And Gabe. Hi.
And Gabe.
And my manicness.
And Gabe's manic.
How you doing?
All right, okay.
Okay, that's your show for this week. We'll see you. Bye.
Bye.